Ever feel like you're walking a tightrope in a relationship? We're diving deep into the world of borderline personality disorder, or BPD, to help you understand how it can make relationships feel exactly like that, a constant balancing act. And to guide us through this complex landscape, we've got a true expert joining us today. Welcome to the show. Your insights on BPD and its impact on relationships are invaluable for this deep dive.
Glad to be here. This is a topic that deserves a lot more open conversation and understanding.
Absolutely. One of the sources I found really drove home this idea of relationships with BPD feeling like walking a tightrope. What resonates with you about that analogy?
It captures that ever-present fear of abandonment that many people with BPD experience. Imagine constantly feeling like the slightest misstep, the smallest disagreement, could lead to rejection and being alone. It's a deeply ingrained fear.
No wonder it creates this sense of always being on edge, constantly trying to maintain balance.
Exactly. And that fear can trigger intense emotional swings, from feeling completely enamored one day to completely devastated the next, sometimes over seemingly insignificant events.
Like that roller coaster feeling so many couples describe experiencing. Can you unpack those emotional swings a bit more? What's happening psychologically?
It often plays out as a cycle of idealization and devaluation. At the beginning, everything's perfect. The other person is idealized, put on a pedestal. But the smallest flaw, even imagined, can shatter that illusion.
It's like that pedestal crumbles and the person they idealized falls so far so fast.
Exactly. And that's when devaluation kicks in.
Yeah.
The same person who was amazing is now seen as flawed, untrustworthy, even the enemy. It's a defense mechanism rooted in that core fear of abandonment.
So it's not intentional cruelty, it's a reaction driven by deep-seated fear.
Yes. And it creates a confusing, painful push-pull dynamic for both people in the relationship.
Definitely a recipe for miscommunication and hurt feelings on both sides. What I'm hearing is that the partner without BPD plays a crucial role in navigating this. What advice do you have for them? Where do they even begin?
It starts with understanding, not blaming. Educating yourself about BPD is essential. But beyond that, active listening and validation are incredibly powerful tools.
So, not necessarily agreeing with their partner's actions, but acknowledging their feelings are real.
Exactly. Let's say your partner is upset because you forgot to call when you said you would. Instead of saying, "Don't be silly, it was just a phone call," try, "I understand why you're upset. It's important to you that I keep my word, and I value that." That simple act of validation can make a world of difference.
Wow. Hearing that example really brings it to life. Validation isn't about who's right or wrong, it's about creating a space of understanding.
Precisely. And from that foundation of validation, you can start practicing active listening. Really try to hear the feelings behind your partner's words, not just the words themselves.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about digging deeper to understand the root of what they're experiencing.
Absolutely. It's not always easy, especially during those intense emotional moments, but it's incredibly powerful.
Speaking of those intense moments, I'm curious about what tools can help someone with BPD regain their footing when those big emotions threaten to take over. Our source mentioned something called grounding techniques.
Grounding techniques are fantastic because they're like an emotional emergency kit. Think deep breathing exercises, focusing on your five senses, what you see, smell, hear, touch, and taste, anything that brings your attention back to the present moment.
So instead of getting swept away by that emotional current, they're finding an anchor to steady themselves.
Exactly. And the best part is, loved ones can learn these techniques too. Imagine your partner starts to spiral, and you can gently guide them through a grounding exercise together. You become a team, facing those intense moments as a united front.
I love that visual, facing the storm together hand in hand instead of weathering it alone. What I'm hearing is that knowledge and communication are crucial.
Absolutely. When both partners understand BPD and are equipped with healthy communication tools, it creates a foundation of respect and empathy, even during difficult moments.
And that brings us to another important aspect mentioned in the source, the idea of setting healthy boundaries. How does that fit into the equation, especially considering the fear of abandonment often associated with BPD?
Boundaries are essential in any relationship, but they can be even more critical when BPD is involved. It's about creating that safe space where both partners feel respected and understood, which can actually reduce that fear of abandonment.
That's interesting. Boundaries is a way to create safety, not distance.
Exactly. It's about open and honest communication. The partner without BPD can express their needs clearly and calmly, not in a blaming way, but in a way that prioritizes self-respect and mutual understanding.
So it's about saying, this is what I need to feel safe and respected in our relationship.
Precisely. And for the person with BPD, it's crucial to remember that boundaries aren't about control or rejection. They're about creating a sustainable foundation for the relationship to thrive.
It sounds like boundaries are less about building walls and more about creating a clear roadmap for navigating the relationship with care and respect.
That's a great way to put it.
We've talked about active listening, validation, grounding techniques, and setting healthy boundaries. What I'm hearing is that communication is key when it comes to navigating the complexities of BPD in relationships.
Absolutely. Understanding the why behind the behaviors is crucial, but it's the communication strategies that empower couples to move forward with greater empathy and connection.
We've covered so much ground already, but there's still so much more to explore. One thing that really struck me in the research was the emphasis on professional support, particularly dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT.
DBT is truly remarkable for people with BPD and their loved ones. It provides an invaluable toolkit for navigating those choppy emotional waters we talked about.
It's like DBT is giving people a whole new set of navigational skills for those rough emotional seas. Tell me more about how it works. What kind of tools does it offer?
One of the most powerful DBT skills is called opposite action. Imagine your partner's instinct is to shut down and withdraw when anxiety spikes. Opposite action encourages them to do the opposite. Reach out to a loved one, go for a walk, engage in a calming activity. It's about rewiring those automatic responses.
So it's like hitting the reset button on those ingrained, often unhelpful patterns.
Exactly. And DBT also emphasizes building communication skills that can transform relationships. Remember those I statements we talked about earlier? DBT dives deep into those. Instead of blaming with, "you always make me feel," it's about owning your experience with, "I feel hurt when."
That small shift in language can make a world of difference, can't it?
Absolutely. It creates a space for understanding instead of defensiveness. Let's say your partner tends to say, "you're always late." Using an I statement might sound like, "I feel anxious when I don't know what time to expect you." It's about expressing your needs clearly and respectfully, which opens the door for a more productive conversation.
It's like you're saying, here's my experience instead of here's what you did wrong, much less likely to trigger a defensive reaction.
You got it. And that's just scratching the surface of what DBT offers. There are tools for managing intense emotions, tolerating distress, and building healthier relationship patterns overall.
This is all sounding incredibly valuable, especially for couples navigating the choppy waters of BPD together. Speaking of support, I know our source highlighted the importance of support groups as well.
Support groups can be absolute lifelines, both for individuals with BPD and their loved ones. Imagine being surrounded by people who truly understand the challenges firsthand, a space to share coping strategies and offer encouragement.
It's that feeling of, I'm not alone in this. So powerful for shifting perspective and building resilience.
Exactly. Support groups offer a safe harbor to connect, learn, and grow, knowing you're surrounded by others who've navigated similar storms. And when someone with BPD thrives, their relationships benefit as well.
It makes me think of that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. When someone feels supported and empowered, it ripples out to those around them.
Absolutely. It's about creating a positive feedback loop. And that brings us back to the importance of self-awareness, which is a cornerstone of both DBT and navigating relationships in general.
It's like having a deeper understanding of your own internal landscape, those thought patterns, emotional triggers, and behaviors that can lead to conflict.
You nailed it. Self-awareness is like having an internal compass. The more you understand your own triggers, the better equipped you are to navigate them effectively.
So it's about recognizing those waves building and having the tools to ride them out instead of getting swept under.
Precisely. And self-awareness goes hand in hand with self-care. Remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. The source really emphasized the importance of activities that nourish your mental and emotional well-being, especially for people with BPD. It could be anything from exercise and meditation to spending time in nature or pursuing creative passions.
It makes sense. When you prioritize your own well-being, you show up as a stronger, more grounded individual, which naturally benefits your relationships.
Exactly. And it's not selfish to prioritize self-care. It's an act of self-respect, which then allows you to show up more fully for the people you care about. We often talk about communication in relationships, but we sometimes forget about the importance of communicating with ourselves, listening to our own needs, and honoring them.
That's such a powerful point. Now, before we move on, I want to circle back to something we touched upon earlier, splitting. It sounds similar to that idealization and devaluation cycle we discussed, but I'm curious to dive a bit deeper.
It's definitely connected. Splitting is that tendency to see things in black and white terms, good or bad, right or wrong, with no middle ground. One minute, someone might be all good, the next they're all bad, often based on a single action or event.
That must be incredibly difficult to navigate, both for the person experiencing it and for their partner.
It can be.
Hmm.
For the person with BPD, splitting often stems from that deep-seated fear of abandonment we talked about. If someone isn't perfect, if they make a mistake, it can feel like a threat to the entire relationship, triggering that fear of rejection.
It's like their emotional alarm bells are going off, signaling that the relationship is in danger, even if it's just a minor misstep.
Exactly. And for the partner, it can feel like they can never quite meet the mark. No matter how hard they try, they're always at risk of being cast in a negative light, which can be incredibly frustrating and hurtful.
So how can couples begin to navigate splitting in a healthier way? What tools are helpful in those moments?
Understanding is the first step. For the partner without BPD, it's about recognizing that splitting is a symptom, not a character flaw.
Right.
It doesn't mean your partner doesn't love you. It means they're struggling with intense emotions and thought patterns they haven't yet learned to manage effectively.
So patience and compassion are key.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is where those grounding techniques and communication skills we discussed earlier come into play.
Mm-hmm.
When splitting occurs, it's important to stay calm and avoid getting defensive. Remember those I statements.
Yeah.
This is a perfect time to use them. Instead of arguing back, try something like, I understand you're feeling hurt and angry right now, and I'm here to listen when you're ready to talk.
It's about creating a safe space for those intense emotions to settle so you can address the issue at hand, not the emotional reaction in the moment.
Exactly. And for the person with BPD, it's about recognizing those black and white thoughts and learning to challenge them. DBT can be incredibly helpful for this, teaching you to pause, examine your thoughts, and consider alternative perspectives.
So it's about stepping back from those immediate, intense reactions and finding a more balanced view.
Exactly. It takes practice, but with time and the right support, it's possible to manage splitting in a way that minimizes conflict and strengthens the relationship.
I love that we're talking about this because it really highlights that BPD doesn't have to be a relationship deal breaker. With understanding, communication, and the willingness to grow, couples can navigate these challenges and build deeper, more fulfilling connections.
I couldn't agree more. And a big part of that is empowering individuals with BPD to advocate for themselves, both within and outside the relationship.
Our source touched on this as well, the importance of self-advocacy. What does that look like in the context of BPD and relationships?
It's about finding your voice, learning to articulate your needs and boundaries effectively. It might be expressing to your partner when you need some space to regulate your emotions, or asking for their support in a specific way.
It's about taking ownership of your well-being and asking for what you need to thrive, both individually and as a couple.
Exactly. And it goes beyond verbal communication too.
Okay.
Self-advocacy might mean scheduling regular therapy sessions, setting aside time for self-care practices, or seeking out a support group.
So it's about recognizing your needs and taking proactive steps to meet them, rather than waiting for someone else to do it for you.
You've got it. It's incredibly empowering to realize that you have a voice, that you have choices, and that you deserve to have your needs met. And that inner strength and self-assurance can transform your relationships.
Our deep dive today has been eye-opening. We've explored the challenges of BPD in relationships, but we've also uncovered a wealth of strategies, tools, and insights for navigating those challenges and building healthier, more fulfilling connections.
It's been a pleasure sharing these insights with you and your listeners. Knowledge is power, and I believe that open, honest conversations like this are crucial for fostering greater understanding and compassion around mental health.
Absolutely. As we wrap up, is there one key takeaway you'd like our listeners to remember from our deep dive?
I'd say this. Relationships with BPD can be incredibly challenging, but they can also be incredibly rewarding. With understanding, compassion, and a shared commitment to growth, it's possible to navigate the waves together and emerge stronger on the other side.
Beautifully said. And for those of you listening, remember that relationships, like the ocean, are constantly evolving. So embrace flexibility, practice those communication skills, and most importantly, lead with compassion for yourself and for your partner. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the complexities of human connection.